Well, very good. With that, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Michael Paulo. I have a different relationship to Michael Paulo than all of our previous guests, as he is a former student of the School of Architecture and received a master's degree in architecture here at Northeastern before going on to a career in fashion design. His work in fashion marries the ideals of purity of form, function, and composition from his architecture studies with his sculptural silhouettes and geometric design elements in his design collections. Although specialized in evening wear, Michael Paulo has introduced a range of day separates which will continue to expand, as well as upcoming plans for accessories. We'll talk a great deal about the differences between the sort of haute couture business and the pret-a-porter or ready-to-wear business. Michael Paulo's gowns are sold at specialty stores nationwide and through special order at Saks Fifth Avenue. The collection will be available shortly through the online shop at www.michaeldepaulo.com. Michael is a great example of how exposure to one kind of design thinking can lead to real innovation in another. So with that, please join me in welcoming our guest, Michael Paulo.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you, George, for that introduction. So I'm basically going to talk to you about how I went from my world of architecture into the design world of fashion, which I think is a great comparison. So basically, I have been designing since I was a child, and I was focused on two things, gowns and high-end homes, and I think I just had a taste for luxury since I was a child. So I graduated from Northeastern with my bachelor's in 2003 and went on to do my master's in 2004. And basically, the design process that I work through is similar to that of architecture, where we go from finding inspiration in any one thing, building a story, building a concept, to sketch form, and then the editing process to make a collection cohesive and tell a story through the concept created. And then that then stems into fabric selection, which basically works with the designs that I produce and the sketches that work with the collection. Then we go to muslin. In addition to doing fittings and then the final product. So basically here, what I'm trying to show you is a comparison between going from the world of architecture to fashion and the similarities of building or creating a product. In fashion, you know, we're developing a story, in architecture, a concept, and then we're then, you know, going to sketch form. In the world of fashion, we go to muslin, which is similar to that of architecture and building a model, as you can see on both left and right. And, you know, to relate it to an architectural detail, as fashion is all about details, and so is architecture. Basically, I go from, you know, showing a drawing with a mapped out detail to that of a construction detail in architecture, in which things are mostly closer looked at opposed to the whole big picture. And then the finished product being the actual gowns you see on the bottom to the actual architectural modernist building on the bottom of architecture. So my signature stems greatly from architecture. I don't think I would be designing the way I am unless I had gone to school for architecture. The look is an overall sculptural, clean line, bold silhouettes, but has a strong emphasis on feminine detailing. So body conscious accentuates the woman's figure while being architectural and strong. So for inspiration, you know, can come from anywhere. It's, you know, good to be open-minded, and here I'm showing an example of, you know, a flower in terms of color and draping and how that then becomes a finished garment, working with the inspiration of the flower to the left. Basically, you know, starting a collection, which I produce 2 collections a year, one for fall and one for spring, and basically the initial get-go of designing a collection is to really come up with a story and design for that specific girl and what her story is. My customer happens to be an intellectual woman. She knows fine goods, she knows luxury, she knows quality, and that's always the backbone of what I'm designing for. So basically, I've come up with this little story about a woman, and I'd like to tell you a story about a woman. She's of herself, her own, strong in will, but with a silent ear. She's noticed across a lively room, for she stands out, but with no demand. She's cultured and eternal, for she sees beyond. An inner glow she radiates, for she doesn't see, but evident to those around her. She moves with an effortless stride. Style is her, and she creates. She transcends what beauty is in all its depths, an inner confidence which only shines, for she is strong, sees beyond, and stands out. So it's a subtle woman that doesn't, dictate the reference of standing out at a party, but knows she looks good and has that inner confidence. Basically, sketching is a constant source of my life, and sketching anytime, anywhere, as you can see in these examples, from a napkin at a restaurant to thumbnail sketches to put the whole perspective together and tell a tight and cohesive story. And then I go into the rendering process. So basically, working with designing and drawing, and then taking fabrics, which I custom design and print on silk mostly. Here you can see the story of kind of this Asian-inspired architectural geometric pattern of the magnolia contrasted with the underlying grid that tells the story of my Spring 14 collection. And then we have the stages of development, which is basically taking the actual sketch and then going and working on it in terms of draping, creating the overall silhouette, the proportion, as you'll see on the form and the banding, and having the sketch basically come to life. Color selection is important, basically where I typically, find a great print that I'm inspired by and pull the colors from the print of the story of the collection and create solid pieces from that print. With that being said, also using lace and adornment. And then similar to that of architecture, embroidery is a necessary aspect of the world. So I will basically draw a detail of what I want something to look like, and beading that I do is done in India, which is outsourced because of the quality that it's done. And basically this is showing a concept drawing to a computer rendering, and then the final product on the bodice of this gown, off the shoulder, leaf organza gown detail. And then taking in terms of architectural details, angles, geometric, linear shapes, pleating, which has become a signature of mine, looking at the architectural detail once again, and then comparing that to a beaded concept that I used for a gown. I think through going to school for architecture, my diagrammatic nature of producing almost construction drawings for the actual details is apparent. And then working with the idea of sculptural silhouettes. So very clean, linear, strong silhouettes that, have that feminine appeal while also being clean and structured. Here we go to client fittings. So basically, as it was mentioned, I sell to stores nationwide, and I sell to Saks Fifth Avenue, which is where these images are from. And basically, selecting the dress for the customer is, matching her personality with her body type, and then working with her directly throughout the process in terms of building a dress that takes the initial concept of design for me and then makes it her own. Structured fabrics is a primary use of my designs, where they're rigid and structural and sculptural. So fabrics like silk file, taffeta, leather, as you can see an example of each here. And then beaded patterns, basically, working with beading, but keeping it very clean and modern, and you can see a more Art Deco type pattern with the first gown onto a more grid-light type pattern on the second, and then a geometric black jet over leather detailing on the bodice of the last gown. And then production. So basically, you produce a collection, you produce samples, and then you go into making it available for the public. So design changes based on, we're not all 6 feet models, so it has to then be applied to the quote-unquote normal girl. So design changes, changing the pattern from the sample to production, adding and modifying for the client, and building the dress as beautifully on the inside as it is on the outside. Here I'm showing a diagrammatic sketch in terms of a project that I had done in architectural school, a diagrammatic, and relating that to a geometric shirt that was from spring 2014, the latest collection that I just produced, in showing the comparison of the two. And then we get into the business portion of fashion, and it's, capital and funding, where you produce a collection, and that's money spent on the collection. Then public relations to brand recognition, and then shows. Here's a show I had done at the Empire Hotel in New York City, an installation which basically models are standing, editors and buyers are coming in, and they're looking at the fashions and the models as that of sculpture, which is a good way of showcasing the product. And then I move into lookbooks. So the lookbook basically is the tool that shows the buyers, shows the editors what they're actually going to see for the specific collection. And it's, similar to that of a hammer. It's a tool to show the actual garment. And then editorial. I recently teamed up with Acura for a style campaign in which they were drawing comparisons between their linear, clean shapes of their car design to a fashion point of view. And so they chose 5 designers and they showcased them throughout the nation. And the finished product was a piece from Fall 13 alongside a car. And then the future growth of my brand and where I expect it to go is, bridal, accessories, fragrance, MDP, which would be an inspired, mass-produced line by Michael DiPaolo, home decor, stationery, and jewelry. All of this being executed through brand recognition. And here we can see bridal. It ties into the same category of evening wear, which I've been doing. This is Linda Pizzuti Henry, shown here, who the owner of the Red Sox, so that's a good thing. You can see her here. And then accessories, which is the backbone of the business. Once you have the name out there, like that of a Chanel, it's a way everyone can have a piece of the puzzle. You may not be able to afford a $2,000 gown, but you can have a $65, bottle of perfume that makes it a mass-produced product and allows the consumer to buy. So basically here is an editorial piece that I had done and showing that of a fragrance line. And then MDP, which was a diffusion line, as I spoke about, it represents commercializing the product, doing a mass production line at a cheaper price point, similar to that of, Calvin Klein. You can go to Saks Fifth Avenue, you can go to Bergdorf Goodman and buy the product, but you can also go to Macy's, and, the various price points just allow for name recognition and allowing the general public to have a piece of the pie. And then home furnishings, which is something I would love to get into in terms of connecting the whole brand and the brand's aesthetics into home decor, which basically would make it, a signature element of my architectural background and whatnot. And then stationery in home decor is a huge aspect, similar to that of a Jonathan Adler, kind of working with the aesthetic, the minimalism, but still the feminine quality of producing this product that really covers the whole lifestyle of this woman that I'm designing for. Here we have jewelry, so both costume and precious gems, basically showcasing, similar to that of a Frank Lloyd Wright, where he not only built his architectural homes, but he also furnished them and did the clothing. So it's a soup to nuts type process where I cover all bases of the lifestyle of the woman. And then the building of the brand is, like anything else, it's the most important thing at this point. It's basically getting the name out there. Once the name's out there, it's basically allows you to flourish into these next parts of the design process. And then the website component. So I recently launched my website, which includes, showcases the collections the various collections, the press that I've received, e-commerce, which basically allows the consumer to buy a gown online through a savvy system I created where a woman can enter her bust, waist, hip, and kind of build a dress and ship it directly to her because people are all about e-commerce these days. So this is basically showing the stores that I sell to are the basic, boutiques nationwide, Saks Fifth Avenue. And then basically this is an illustration of the actual online store, showcasing my product and allowing the consumer to buy direct from the website. Brand identity, as I grow, creating this rendered storefront image of, a New York storefront, of course, and then building from there and getting the product out there. Celebrity placement, which is a huge, concept in terms of getting it on the right celebrities, on the red carpet. As you may know, the Academy Awards is basically the biggest runway show of the nation, and basically it, because of fashion, has allowed that. Press, so, examples of the Boston Globe, Women's Wear Daily, which is considered to be the fashion Bible, showcasing the press and getting the name out there, because then the stores can then pick up the line and have a little less of a risk factor in terms of having the line sell. And then in summary, basically the architectural background that I have received, I think mostly was important because it set up a great rigor for me. Hard work, persistence in knowing that it can get done, just have to be persistent about it. And then, from going from collection to production, the key details, brand vision, technology, which cannot be underestimated at this point, media, e-commerce, and then the expansion approach to building the overall brand that I am trying to create. And that is that. Thank you.
Well, that was fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much.
And, your presentation anticipates the sort of scope of the class, I think, very well. On the one hand, the comparisons between how a design education in one field can migrate into another, I thought that was really helpful. But let me start with a straightforward question. What caused you? Did you go straight into fashion right when you got out of architecture school, or how did the transition happen?
I went to Europe for a month, and came back, and I developed a sketch, a collection through Sketch. Sent it to New York buyers, and they called me back. And Joan Kaner, she was the head of Neiman Marcus at the time, and I said, "Oh, I don't want to get into Neiman Marcus." Thought nothing of it. She called me during Fashion Week, and I thought nothing of it. And at the end of the conversation, she said, "You just have to believe in yourself." And I still have that note. And after that, I spoke to some people in fashion, and they said, "Do you mind if I ask who called you?" And I said, "I'm Joan Kaner." And they said, "It's a pretty big deal." Especially during Fashion Week. And she was wonderful. She walked me through an hour-long conversation. With that, I produced the actual collection. Went to New York, showed buyers, met her, and she was wonderful. And then she retired 2 weeks later. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. It is funny how mentors have a way of just, they're there 1 minute, you turn around, and they're not, and it's up to us. But here's this is a topic that I think is so relevant to a conversation about fashion and of architecture, and of design in general, which is, in fashion we call the distinction between haute couture and pret-a-porter, or high fashion and ready to wear. And in your presentation, which it was very prescient, because you certainly outlined the way in which you're planning to affect that transition, and indeed are already doing some of it. But that is really the challenge in fashion, isn't it? That to make a name for yourself, you have to really start, you can't just walk in and say, "Hi, Kmart or
Right.
Sears. I'd like to have a global clothing line that I will sell to millions or billions of people. Instead, you clothe one or two people that you hope will be influential. So maybe
Yes.
talk to us a little bit about that transition from the completely. There's a very architectural analog, if I could say so, between the custom designed home for an individual person on a completely unique site. It's completely one of a kind. And then, whether it's Frank Lloyd Wright Usonian houses or any number of other kinds of houses that were designed to be prototypes and produced many times. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how that works in fashion.
Yeah, it's the best way to describe it is similar to that of Chanel, Christian Dior. They're all haute couture brands, and they're not the money makers of those brands.
Right.
So the haute couture basically is the story behind the collection. And that inspires the fragrances, it inspires the color schemes for makeup, for the more ready-to-wear product that a consumer can just walk into the store and buy versus the $100,000 gown that, most people can't.
Right.
So basically, however, it's not a moneymaker for these, design houses. The perfumes, the accessories is.
Right.
So it's brand identification.
Right. Well, this is so interesting because, of course, to the day-tripping non-fashion designer, I've always marveled at the fact that somebody who becomes, let's say, a great basketball player or a phenomenal pop singer is suddenly selling me a fragrance, for example.
Right.
And of course the answer is that's because they've already cleared the first hurdle, which is brand recognition. And by the way, there's a bunch of people who in my day wanted to be like Mike, be like Michael Jordan, or you want to be like Pink, or you want to be like any number of these other, you see yourself reflected in these people, and therefore they can sell you something. And what you have to do, I guess, is actually build that up from the ground up in the haute couture world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, I think it's important to, we also live in a very celebrity-obsessed world. So you have people like, Katie Holmes, Victoria Beckham, starting these lines of clothes, which is great, but there's a lot of capital behind them in doing so. So money talks.
Well, and they're trying to get to the whole point is they're trying to get to the sort of ready-to-wear. These are different routes to get to the ready-to-wear market because that's where the money is.
Yes.
Is that right?
It's the backbone of the business.
Yeah.
Accessories, perfumes.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, it's interesting because it makes you, I think that's true when you zoom out and you think about more different kinds of design. This happens more than we think. Think about a line of automobiles. Well, not everybody can afford the top of the line, Audi, what is it now? I think it's the, the R8. I'm trying to think of, for myself, what do I covet?
Right.
Unfortunately, it's a $150,000 car, and despite what you think about college professors, that's not really how it works. But then you can ratchet back I can get the equivalent of the fragrance version.
Right, absolutely.
And by the way, all these car dealerships, actually they do sell a whole bunch of other stuff now that allows you to be engaged without getting the unique one-of-a-kind item. The difference with cars, I suppose, is that even the high-end stuff is not actually custom designed for an individual consumer. It's just not possible. Whereas some of your dresses for Linda Pizzuti, I assume are. They are custom designed, one-of-a-kind things. Is that right?
Yes. So, it's basic, you take, like I said, I do the 2 collections a year, and you do work with that basic shell. Not everything, down the runway, some things are so sensationalized that where could you possibly wear that? But the key is that you build the concept, and then these people come to you, and you make it to them, and you add a sleeve. You create something that's custom and doable with their body type and what they can actually wear, opposed to the 6-foot model.
Well, it seems like, especially when I look at your website, and you're talking about these different ways of selling, even what you're doing now.
Yes.
You are kind of trying to establish steps along the way. If the end game is national or even global access, well, and the starting point is, let's say, dressing a couple of people very, very well and get a lot of press. And then it seemed like you have this great intermediate point, which is this is a kind of a haute couture collection, but we can tweak it to, so I can send you in my measurements and say, these are, I don't know, I mean, how much modification is possible? How much customization in the current system that you have is possible? In other words, you have a collection.
Right.
It has a few dress types. I've seen some of the stuff, and some of it does seem much more wearable by a person going to work than just the gowns.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, you're dealing, my concept now is to take the woman from day to night, you know, cover all aspects of her wardrobe, still in luxury, but a woman doesn't need a gown per se every day, but she'll buy a great, you know, jacket.
Might even be a little awkward, right, to show up at work.
I think so. I think it would be the best thing, yeah.
But I think that's really interesting, and I really was drawn to the, you know, we've talked a lot about the need for having a story, for having a, and I appreciate very much that you shared that with us, because, you know, a lot of the time the story seems like it is implied, it's embedded, well, especially with a celebrity example, there's already a narrative there. You get to buy, and that's the bad boy, or that's the whatever, you know? And therefore, I've made the following clothing decisions to reinforce that story. But I appreciate that you, like, you really are doing this like an architect in some ways. You're writing out the actual intention. So how does that, do you imagine that story being the same every time the collection comes out? Is there a certain level of consistency as to who the consumer is that you're imagining, who this woman is that you're imagining?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's, if you look at someone like a Donna Karan, you know, she basically adapted 7 pieces of clothing, and that's how she started her line, because she was with Anne Klein for years. And she basically said, there's this need, my friends need it. So out of need becomes a product. And that's the hardest thing, because you want something that people are going to need. And as you know, it's a work in progress, so you're learning your customer through working with her and seeing what she wants. The hardest part is kind of not getting stuck into that as well, and always trying to take that risk and create, you know, over-the-top unique things that are still wearable. That's always been my, you know, goal.
Well, it's really interesting because, you know, we use a lot of words to tie our different speakers together. One of them is context, which, you know, we could have a larger sort of, and we've talked a little bit about, let's say, the context of the celebrity-obsessed culture and various other things. It's certainly the context of a brand-driven sort of business environment. But the second thing on our list is the word question or problem. And I think that's what we're getting at right now, which is, am I trying to solve, it sounds to me like you are trying to strike a balance between solving a problem and prescribing a kind of aesthetic solution. I mean, this is a very architectural challenge, right? On the one hand, it's got to have 3 bedrooms, and I need, you know, I need the family room. You got to give me that. And then on the other hand, you bring your own agenda. Which one? Now, this is really interesting. When you're dealing with high-end gowns, the problem, like, it's easy for me to understand how Donna Karan, and when she was talking with women in the workforce in New York, and they were saying, look, I need this kind of one, let's say, shawl that I can wear with 5 different shirts and so forth. When I travel, I can't take too many things. I mean, I don't know what the problem, how it was articulated. But that would be very clear. That would be a kind of, okay, I got this list of 5 things I've got to make sure I take on. But, like, surely she also brought, she had her own kind of aesthetic sensibility. She was trying to solve the problems and satisfy her own secret aesthetic checklist. Do you share that with your clients? Is that part of your discussion?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think my best designs are, you know, you can take a beautiful girl and you can put her in a beautiful dress, but if it doesn't reflect her personality, it's not right. So I like a smart intellectual customer that knows what she wants to go beyond the superficiality of fashion. You know, someone, like I said, that's intellectual, she knows what quality is. She's buying it because she likes the inside as much as she likes the outside. And it only enhances her personal style and her body type and reflects her personality. So that's the ideal customer.
Right. Well, it seems also that, let's say for gowns, that the problem to be solved, let's say if you were different kinds of clothing have different numbers of items on the list about how many are operational problems. You can think about, I don't know, I need an outer coat that you know will repel water really well because I might get caught in a downpour. That's a very specific, like, performance issue that it either does or it doesn't do.
Yes.
That's just it. Now, I want it to repel water and not be overly shiny. Okay, that's kind of lives on both sides of the aisle. But I wonder, like with evening wear, it's the operational requirements are, I'm sure they're real. I don't want to trip over it. I don't know. I'm sure there are others. I want to be able to get in and out of it, maybe myself, for example. But the aesthetic requirements, though, seem to be dominant in the world of like evening wear. Whereas once you get into the ready-to-wear world, I want a flavor of this, but then I have a whole bunch of performance-related things, right? Like their price, their interchangeability, like none of those necessarily apply in the gown world.
Right. Well, you know, speaking to that, the gown world is more about, for these women, a one-time wear.
Right.
So they're buying this one gown. It's too memorable to actually have it be worn again. So it's a one-type wear versus a jacket or, you know, a separate that they can, you know, change up.
See, as men, we're never that memorable. That's why I like something I can wear again and again and again,
right,
in the hopes that at least once, you know, something of import will result.
Timeless, yeah.
This migration, I mean, it seems to me like the theme of your talk and something that's really relevant for the class is this migration from really designing one kind of stuff that responds to one set of issues to this other one. I mean, I had no idea you were going to show all the business about lifestyle design, but I have a whole bunch of questions about that. Would seem like a really logical choice once you have articulated a vision and, you know, honed it. You start with, you know, your best effort with maybe only a couple of people, right?
Sure.
And then you migrate that story, that paragraph gets clearer and more distinct, and now you can start to imagine a lifestyle, what the living room would be like, and all this. I think that's really exciting. How far along in that thinking are you?
You know, it's the balance of being an artist and having business savviness too, and I like that challenge. You know, it's not just about being the artist; it's about being smart as a business person. So I think the master plan's great. I like to kind of be in the moment. So it's not too far. It's mostly a mental thing right now. And you know, I think when you start to focus on something, it comes. Right. So I haven't really focused on it.
I mean, I think it's great having gosh, if half the people I know who are at the stage in their careers that you're at had as clear a kind of potential arc laid out. Look, not all of it. You know, some of it will happen, some of it won't happen. It'll get reevaluated from time to time, but I think it's really a great idea for anybody to have a kind of arc like that is at the intersection of both their interests and business realities. Right. So I mean, I think that makes tons of sense. It does, because we're both trained as designers, it does beg all kinds of interesting questions, like when you think about the designers who have come before you who have broadened into some of those fields. You know, I think about, certainly Giorgio Armani has, really, you know, in a way it's sort of battle of who can get more minimalist.
Right.
It's like Calvin Klein or Giorgio Armani or these, you don't see, it seems to me there is room for a more expressive move into the sort of lifestyle line, if you want. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
That minimalism is actually fairly crowded right now.
Yes.
And something that took a more robust, that wasn't going to try to be, let's say, because those things aren't actually everything for everybody. They're not for everybody, that minimalism stuff. And none of them will be. So when you identify this sort of person, this you know, this customer, which maybe broadens into, you know, the woman you've been designing for and the family to which she is attached, or the circle of friends to which she is attached. I think that's really interesting, and that you would start to develop, like, I mean, at least I'm just projecting. I would start to develop lists of qualities, like what are the things that this person likes.
Yeah.
I think that's
It's getting in tune with, you know, what she likes, what type of jewelry she wears, what events she attends. Even when she's lounging around in the house, what is she wearing, you know? If you can define your customer, it almost becomes a formula for design.
Yeah,
and that's very helpful, because then it becomes factual, opposed to this out in the air concept.
Gosh, that's a great segue. You know, another word we've used a lot is empathy. And so many designers talk about it. And I think sometimes students are surprised by that, but of course empathy is nothing more than trying to understand the world from someone else's perspective. And your customer is that person. You also alluded to sort of, if you want, you know, if empathy allows you to design really well for somebody because you know them, how, I mean, in addition to the money of which is the metric, the primary metric in a way for any business. If I were a plumbing supplier or an advertising agency or a fashion designer or an architect, at some level, we could all answer the question, well, how are you doing? By how is the market responding? But I wonder if there are other metrics that you use when other ways of evaluating, you know, when you do a collection. I know you go through multiple iterations, I'm sure, on every gown or in every dress, and this whole muslin world is one that I can intellectually appreciate, but I feel like, well, I should go watch that process sometime because it's probably very interesting. The idea of trying to take it from sketch to the first 3D iteration. It's just to see whether the sketch, does this even make any sense? Could this even work? But are there other ways, you know, when you know, how do you go through this? Do you have the 3D representations of, let's say, 4 or 5 dresses or garments in front of you, and do you ask questions like, do they go well enough together? Do they feel like they're part of the same? Do they feel like they could all be owned by this mythical woman? How do you measure?
Yeah, no, I think the editing part is the hardest, because I can sit down and draw 1,000 sketches, but then it, you know, similar to that of architecture, it has to be cohesive. It has to tell a story. You know, there has to be design elements that are consistent while being different. So I think the editing process is where, you know, I'll start to sketch and just sketch, and then tighten it and keep tightening, because you can't produce everything you sketch, obviously.
Well, I know
it would be nice if you could, but
I don't know. You think, you know what I mean? It's like, I think in architecture, when I built more, I'm glad I didn't build everything I sketched.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, you know, in architecture, I would say the metrics are more agreed upon. Somehow, it's more of a commodity. Building is more of a commodity than a high fashion dress, because it has real estate value. Let's say a bank has to loan you money to do it oftentimes. So there's a number of metrics that it has to clear, like, does it conform to zoning? Is this actually a legal structure? These sorts of things. It seems like yours are different and more of your own making. In other words, you get to sort of decide what is going to be a good Michael Paulo dress versus one that might be attractive, but you know, it is just not, you know what I mean? Like, do you ever find yourself, you make a sketch, you do something, and you say, oh my gosh, no, that looks too much like something that another designer would do?
Yeah, I think, you really have to find a niche because, or fulfill a void in the market because there's a lot of beautiful dresses out there.
Right, right.
And you need something that's different and special that is signature to the designer.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to see what I'm getting here. Okay, I'm not sure I can tell. I'm a complete rookie at this, so, all right. Oh, here we go, here we go. I think, yes. Oh, here we go. Okay, well, this one we've sort of talked about already. When you started architecture school, did you know that fashion was a path you wanted to pursue later on? It sounds...
In the back of my head, yeah.
It sounds like it was pretty... If it was in the back of your head, it was more towards the front of the back of your head because you set out a collection very quickly.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't remember, I don't think.
Okay, how about this? This is really interesting. Would you consider your products appropriate over a spectrum of situations or applicable to one type of experience? That's a great question. Do you know what I mean? Let me try to translate here a little bit. Maybe this is asking a question that is somewhat akin to the haute couture versus pret-a-porter thing. A ball gown is often a one-time, look, I'm going to this incredibly important public party at the MFA, we'll be photographed with the governor, right? This is a big deal. And then when I go to the ICA 2 nights later, can't be wearing the same thing. But are there other situations that you're, I think the answer is probably yes, because you're designing stuff for day and night, you're designing...
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's, it's the same customer that's going to come to me for the ball gown, but she's also going to come for me to, because she likes maybe the signature style of a pleat, but doing it in a more constructed, conservative way by day, versus the overtopness of the formal gown.
So I'd say the answer to that is yes. Yes, there is more than one application. Okay, now we have another question. Now I think I'm getting the hang of this, I think. In the transition from architecture to fashion, this is a question about that, which is surprising because actually most of the students are not in architecture school here. Most of them are in engineering and business and health, maybe, other things. Did the brainstorming process that you went through in architecture school,
yes,
did it help you in designing collections?
Yeah, and I think there's a great intellect in architecture, or a process that has helped and guided me into the world of producing and the levels of progression you go through. Right. Similar to that, like where I, compared a model to a muslin. Right. Where you can actually see the three-dimensional and then go from there, I think has made it definitely a similarity that has helped me. Right. Yes.
Well, I think you make a really good point that because it is in both fields, in some areas, maybe you can do a sketch and execute immediately. I think, let's say, maybe graphic design, nowadays especially. You make a thumbnail sketch, you put it into InDesign and boom. But in fashion and in architecture, there's really unavoidably at least 3 or 4 steps along the way, and that probably does require a kind of, there's got to be some idea there to begin with, or it will fall away when it meets the challenges of these.
I think concept's the biggest thing, when you don't have a strong concept, it doesn't work. Once you have that concept, I started producing my fall 2014 collection. I really like the concept, so it's making my love for it better. My passion's there, and it can make sense to me. Right. So I think that somehow manifests to the customer and the world.
You know, it's interesting because the concept that that's definitely the word we use in architecture more than, you maybe use story more in fashion, would you say? Would you also say concept?
Story, but I think concepts, you know, definitely the architectural
Yeah.
approach that
Right.
I put on my fashion world
Right.
versus story. Yeah.
Well, we would certainly, we use the word, we've made reference to the need for a compelling story here all along. And, you know, I mean, we didn't, the first time I taught this course last spring, I had them all read the biography of Steve Jobs because it was such a, it's such a story about an obsessive, compulsive person who just obsessed with design quality and simplicity and ease of use and so forth. It ended up being a little confusing, though, when we had that book and then we had all the guests because they weren't necessarily talking about the same thing.
Right,
So that's
right.
why we're not doing it this time. But you know, the Apple story is so compelling about across all these different problems, across all these different products, across all these different environments. You have no trouble whatsoever identifying the look and feel of, or the interface, if you will, of an Apple product.
Right.
Whether it's going in the store or you know, opening the box. And you know, that importance of that story cannot be overstated, because it's got to be somebody, you know, they can't do all that for somebody who does not appreciate that. You know, that is not going to make them money if the customer is not really digging that.
Yes.
And clearly, your customers really like what you were able to do for them in terms of their sense of themselves, their sense of confidence. I think that's very powerful.
Yeah. And I think you have to have that obsessiveness. Because you're the only one at the end of the day that's going to make it perfect,
Right.
or as close to perfect as you can make it.
Right. Well, I want to make sure that students have the opportunity to ask all the questions that they want to. But in the meantime, let me just do, I'm trying to manage my multiple lists here. When it comes to leadership, you know, this is a question that we've asked of a lot of designers, because I think in certain kinds of design, designers really are leaders. I mean, whether it is, you know, on the environmental front today, on the sustainability front, people really showing fellow citizens the way on dealing with coastal development and dealing with rising waters and so forth and the like. And how people in fashion or the clothing industry in general lead can obviously happen at a wide range on that spectrum, right? Everything from, you know, I think there's a shoe manufacturer in New England who for every pair of shoes he sells, he like gives shoes to people in poor countries or something like this. I don't know that, you know, certainly doing that is powerful in its own right, but perhaps as an act of leadership it is more powerful because it sends a story, and it's probably tied to the customers of that. You know, there's something that would be of value to those customers. It seems to me that fashion designers very much lead as well, but they lead more in the realm of taste and aesthetics and lifestyle, if you will. Who are some designers that you have really admired and you feel have kind of, you know, moved the ball forward when it comes to fashion? Who are your design heroes?
Donna Karan, I've always loved. I think she had a great vision, smart. Diane von Furstenberg, you know, she created a wrap dress that to this day still sells. Simple product, but, you know.
Now, why did that wrap dress, why was that such a hit? Was it solving more than one problem at a time? What was what would you say the story behind it?
It worked for various body types. It was easy, it was modern, it wasn't fussy, but it looked good.
Right.
And to this day, you know, with changing just the print season by season, it's a mass-produced, great product that most people can have in their wardrobe.
Right.
So that's, you know, those are smart. In terms of the haute couture, Valentino, you know, has always been. I love Oscar de la Renta.
Now, what is it about, unlike if we were talking about architecture, and I would say, okay, I totally understand why you like that one, and why you don't like that one. What is it about Valentino or Oscar de Lorenzo that did they help affect a transition from one era to another? Were they more about reinterpreting a classical style that had been around forever? Can you help us understand that a bit more?
I think for me, they were able to, or Oscar's still able to preserve a luxury, opulent lifestyle while being modern. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's a hard balance to do. Right. He can dress the, 20-year-old daughter to the 80-year-old grandmother. Right, right. So within that family, he's dressing, and now he's doing children's clothes. So he really has the whole gamut. And that's just a good plan.
Yeah. Well, it's a good business plan, and it's a good, and he's able to really pull it off with quality at all levels.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, let me throw you a little bit of a curveball. And who are architects that you admire, whether now or in the past, or in other words, have any influenced you in particular in your second career as a fashion designer?
Luke Hung, Renzo piano, clean, beautiful. Cool House. I don't think any one specific. I've always tried to maybe become inspired through a collection, through an architect. Right. But I think it's more the principles of architecture, or the shapes. It's not one architect that has kind of dictated a.
Well, I'm going to affect a little bit of translation here for the audience. So, Renzo piano, folks. You have the great luxury of being right near two major Renzo piano projects, one of which is just being completed now, one of which was completed a year or two ago. The one that was completed a year or two ago is literally right across the park, the addition to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, the expansion of that museum, which had its own very unique problem to solve, which was we really need a bunch of additional space in our museum, but by the way, Isabella Stewart Gardner said, you can't change anything about the Italian palazzo that I built to be my museum. This is the museum from which the paintings were stolen. They're not allowed to show any new things in there, even though the paintings have been gone for 20 years. This is an ironclad will, by a woman with an ironclad will. And so what they did was they built this very different addition to the building. And I can understand the attraction of piano because instead of having a signature look, he builds a look out of a solution to a very specific problem. And so the other new building that's going up by Renzo Piano, and he is, I'm so glad you mentioned him because I think he is the most like a really good fashion designer in some ways of any architect practicing today. The new Harvard Art Museums up on right next to Le Corbusier's Carpenter Center. It's been completely spent untold hundreds of millions of dollars completely reconceptualizing their art museums. And the result is, of course, fixing a whole bunch of logistical problems, but that's not what you notice when you look at it. It's like this giant new identity. Harvard is now a major player in the art museum, seeing people wake up, here it is. And, he did it through a few moves that are pretty impressive. But it's like, it seems to me in a way, it's like fashion. There are certain givens, the person's body type, their taste, their look. There's certain things you don't get to, presumably you don't tell your customers, I've got a great dress for you, by the way, before fall you need to lose 40 pounds. That's not a good conversation, Rob.
Not a good conversation.
So it's like you can't tell the client in architecture, I've got a great building for you if you could just buy the 4 lots next to your house were golden. So, right? And so you've got to learn how to leverage the situation that you're doing.
Yes.
Well, I think that's really great. We won't, I mean, the Rem Koolhaas thing seems to me very different. And then, just more of a kind of flamboyant statement-making.
Rebellious, yeah.
Well, that's super interesting. Now, here's another question. Who are some designers that you really like, fashion designers that you really like, but that you do not choose to emulate at all? In other words, like, I really love Bill Blass or whoever,
right.
But I don't do anything like that. Is that an impossible question to answer?
Nope. I just have to think of one. There's many, so. I can appreciate, a Marc Jacobs. He's great, but he's not who I want to.
Does he have a different client base, are you thinking? Or does he have a different target? Is his story really different from the one you tell? You tell a story about your consumer, your woman.
Right.
Is the one he tells very, very different? Or does he just respond to that set?
He has a rebellious kind of point of view.
I see.
His first collection he sent down with destructed, clothing and shocked the world, and nobody grunge. He explored grunge and he got a terrible review. But he's a leader in fashion, so he has power and influence, and I respect that. I respect him.
It's not the point of view that you have. You're not looking to represent rebelliousness.
Yes, or this hipster-esque person.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's so like, forgive my deep ignorance, but like Jean-Paul Gaultier or something like that, who's been rebellious for 30 years or something.
I think rebellion's great.
Right.
I think it's shocking, it's controversial, it's helps sales.
Right.
We need a story. Right. But in terms of his prescribed aesthetic.
You're not going to dress 4 generations of people in either of those, probably, right?
Good point.
Okay. All right. That's great. Well, we talked about the furnishings, linens, cutlery, dishware. This was all the stuff that you got to that I was going to ask you about. It's fantastic. And I look forward to seeing more of that. Do we have any questions that we want to ask from live from the audience? Or am I... Oh, okay. Here we go. Please, come on up.
Hi. So how do you create new collections each season while still being able to retain your sense of your signature, to make sure that everyone still knows that's you while being different enough that people aren't just saying, oh, that's just like last season?
I think it's formulaic in a way. It's like, you have to, the challenge is to evolve and not, repeat things, but at times to repeat things. Where signature elements like pleating, if I can add that in some way, somehow, but it has to be new.
Right.
But, people are going to say, oh, that's a Michael DePaulo. So keeping signatures, I guess, within a new collection.
Well, the collections are cyclical in themselves, in a way, in the sense that time is not linear. I mean, they are fall and spring. And then after that, another fall and spring.
Yeah.
And so there are elements that are probably similar.
Yep.
So this is a great question. This is about production. Do you have hands-on experience with stitching and putting the dress together, or is the sketch sent to a different department or a different person?
I go from sketch to muslin to draping to fabric selection, but I do not sew the garment.
Do some designers sew?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That's interesting.
And it's great, the construction process, because it shows you limitations.
Right.
What you can and can't do in a way. So it isn't necessary to at least have the knowledge of construction.
Sure, but just as an architect.
Yeah.
I draw something that is completely unfeasible, and that doesn't help anybody when the contractor then comes to me and says, okay, we're going to have that really, really slim glass wall that you're talking about. It's just going to be giant steel beams behind.
Yeah, it's definitely organization is the key to success, because you're getting beating patents from one contractor, it's going to another contractor to be sewed, another patent maker. So the more detail you can provide without having verbal exchange is my key.
Right.
The more emails I can write and the more diagrammatic I can make something,
Yes.
it saves me energy
Well,
in discussion.
That raises the question about, the mode of representation and visualization in fashion. At some level, can seem like it's been unchanged for 100 years, right? We see those beautiful elongated. We wonder why all the models have to be 6 feet tall. It's because you guys all draw these dresses with these unbelievably vertical lines. But that mode of representation, of capturing the gesture, is so essential to fashion.
Yes.
But now in the digital age, in the same way that, while you were getting your architectural education, the world was being transformed utterly in terms of representation from, well, you probably did, I don't know if you did hand drafting here or not.
Yeah, I did.
So you were still here during the transition, but it used to be that all that was done by hand, and now almost all of it is done digitally. How much are digital files used in your editing process and sending to fabricators?
Huge. So basically, the way I work is I'll take a shell, I'll draw a shell of a silhouette, and then Photoshop, rendering patterns and, taking the actual fabric, scanning it, and then putting it as a layer to show the actual reality.
Oh, that's so great, yeah.
So, yeah.
But now, do you do that? Photoshop is generally a 2D thing. Do you do it as 3D? Do you make three-dimensional models of these things or no?
Not so much. The muslin, it was, the first attempt at that. In terms of, creating a beautiful, fun sketch, that then has to be interpreted to like a flat construction document. So that one beautiful sketch is not enough. It's enough for the general public to find it to be pretty. Right. But then to send to a contractor, it needs to be, the back, the front.
Yeah. No, see, this is very interesting because it really is a lot like architecture in that it is really communicated at some level still in two-dimensional flat things because I lay the fabric down on a table and this is the shape it needs to be. And then this other piece of fabric, and then they get sewn together in the following way.
Yes.
That's interesting.
And that's very hands-on. It's something you can't just leave and pick up. It's something that needs to be worked.
But I would think in this age of 3D scanning and of 3D fabrication and lots of other things, are there any clothing, even if it's not yours, is there any clothing that is being made in a completely different way now, as opposed to flat stuff that gets cut and sewn together? Is there any stuff that, I don't know, is extruded? Or is there any stuff, because when you think about, there's so many building components now on very complex buildings that are every bit as complex as the human body.
Right.
Where the skin of the building is designed and represented in 3 dimensions, where, for example, every rib of a glass curtain wall is a different length, has a different curvature, and takes a different piece of glass. And so one could imagine clothing perhaps made in a similar way, but that's not happening, not in your world right now.
Not so much, no. I mean, it's between the muslin and the sketch, there's, I'll cut pieces of paper and, fold them in a different way, and but not digitally as much, no.
That's interesting.
That is interesting.
Any final questions for Michael? Yes, please.
A lot of the people who came in and spoke to us told us that they usually have to do really what the consumer wants and almost give up what their views of design are. You seem to do a little bit more of your own stuff. You want to just explain?
Yeah, I think, it's the struggle is to not sacrifice your ultimate design, but to reflect their personality. And, someone has to feel comfortable. If they're not comfortable, it can be the most beautiful dress, it can fit them the best, but they're not going to embrace and be themselves. So I think through their personal style, and as long as I keep the integrity of the piece in some way to my signature, then that is satisfying.
You know, it's interesting. I'm not sure I would agree that all the previous guests had necessarily just thrown in the towel.
Right.
But I would say that it is true that there are different degrees of customization or sort of large audience. I don't want to say generic, but that's really what I mean. There's certain, if you have a product that is intended to be sold to 1 million people, it is. We'll customize it as much as we can for you. Like we'll give you an orange case for your phone, but the phone, I'm sorry to tell you, it's more or less going to be the same. Have you seen these ads lately? There's a new phone out that they're so excited that you can have a different color back on it or a different color button.
Sure.
Anything you want. Well, not really anything. Actually, we won't hardly do anything differently other than put these little wrappers on. But anyway.
I think the world is going back to what I've noticed in fashion, to this custom. People are liking custom, and you have to be smart to make it simple yet it's almost like build a dress, if you will.
Well, kit of parts.
Kit of parts.
The term we would have used in architecture, and I think the term they use in economics is probably mass customization. The idea that in the digital world we can, I mean, what is a lot of the websites that we go to, what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
I send in measurements and I get the dress that I saw, but customized.
Yeah, customers are smart,
Great.
Hi.
Put the mic down so we perfect.
I was wondering kind of where you get your inspiration from, because you said you like design your own pattern and stuff, like fabric, and I was wondering do you like design your fabric first and then like decide what type of dress like will work best with the fabric, like, or do you like design the dress first and then you design the fabric like from that?
I generally design the dress and then find the fabric or design it. There are times you find inspiration in, looking through fabric types, and then you say, this silhouette can come because of that. But generally, my way of doing things is that I sketch and then I find the fabric. But inspiration can come anytime, anywhere. Doesn't have to be anything extravagant. It can be a stone on the street. I mean, it's not, nothing amazing. Perhaps it's just something that kind of hits you, I think.
One thing that's very relevant to this is that one of our guests at the end of this course is a songwriter who's been a very successful songwriter on Broadway and for all kinds of different purposes. But it's great. It's very analogous to this because there's an age-old question in songwriting, of course, which came first, the music or the lyrics? And some of the great songwriters in the American Popular Songbook would answer one. Oftentimes they were duos, right? One guy, I wrote all the lyrics first, and Johnny came up with the tune. But then other people will say, no, you never do it that way because the tune is the emotional kind of core of the song, and we'll figure out what the words are. That's easy later. Anyway, this chicken and egg kind of battle exists in all kinds of things, I think.
And I don't think one's better than the other. It's just how one's mind operates, Yeah.
It's. I'm sorry that we haven't had more songwriters to go along with this enterprise because I'm telling you, I can't think of anything that is more of a design problem than songwriting. Because, by the way, this is not just songwriting because I hadn't, because I feel good today, I'm going to write a light art song. This is, by the way, for a show. This is going to be the 7th song in this show. Here's the arc of the story. Here's the character who's going to sing it. Here's what I need. I need a song, I don't know, for an alligator to sing in this show we're doing about how sad he is that he accidentally ate the bird. Okay, go to. Can you have me something by tomorrow? If that's not a design project I've never heard of.
It's funny.
Anyway, final questions? Yes, please, come on.
So you spoke very highly of meeting with a customer and actually fitting them with a dress and that kind of stuff, but then you also incorporated the e-commerce kind of website deal into your business, where you don't meet with them at all, and they could be, ordering a dress that you would not agree with them wearing. So I was just wondering how you feel about that.
it's a balance because it's business like anything else, you know. And today's consumer wants efficiency, and they're used to doing this. I mean, you can visit neimanmarcus.com or .good, and you can find a $15,000 gown that people are just clicking on and ordering.
Right.
So the market dictates that I would be missing out by not doing that. And at the end of the day, it is a business like anything else. So,
But it would be colored, wouldn't it, by the kind of identification that the consumer makes with the brand that you've already established. This is where I see the connection there, is that like the haute couture stuff is where you establish who your consumer is, who your customer's identity is. And later, if there are more people who can relate to that person, maybe the web is an efficient way to reach them, because some of them live in Topeka, and some of them live in Seattle, and some of them live in LA.
And it's also a PR tool. It's a branding tool. You know, it's not only a sales perspective, but it's also getting the name out there. Thanks.
Michael, I want to thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much.